Okay, Giuseppe. So I just wanted to go a little bit deeper into the recording cycle, just to try and explain the setup a little bit. It's unfortunately a little bit complicated, so we have to use multiple devices to capture the podcast recording, and also give the host and the interviewee the ability to be able to hear each other. One of the unfortunate rules in the US, which has informed the design of iPhones, and I think Android phones as well, is that the applications on both phones actually tend to prohibit the recording of phone calls. So the law actually states that you need, over in the States, and I think it's similar in Australia, basically says that you need either the express consent of someone to record their voice, and that can be either verbal consent or written consent, but the app developers have decided to actually prohibit the whole thing altogether. So for example, if you're in the middle of recording something on your phone by yourself, then if the phone rings, the recording will automatically cut out and stop, and you'll lose it. So that's just kind of the way it is. And although there's some interesting apps coming out at the moment which we'll research, at the moment this is the most stable way of doing the recording, so that we capture the best audio quality from a local recording, as opposed to just doing, say, a recording of a Zoom session, which is recorded up in the cloud, and the sound quality tends to be, well, it depends on the strength of the signal connection, and it's usually a lot more flowery and watery than what we get from a local recording. So this is why we've set it up as we have in this case. So the left side of the diagram shows the interviewer, so the person conducting the podcast interview. So the interviewer will have their either their microphone, lapel mic, or earpods plugged directly into their iPhone or their Android phone, and they'll be using voice memos or the recorder in Android to do the actual physical recording. So this side, so the interviewer side of the recording, actually gets recorded onto the phone. Now the exact same thing is true over the other side for the interviewee. They similarly have their earpods plugged into their iPhone or Android phone, and they're using an app like voice memos or whatever to actually do the physical recording. Now the problem is that when you're doing all that sort of stuff, you actually need to be having a conversation together, and it needs to be conducted over the phone network or over the internet. So in order to be able to hear each other, so for the interviewer and the interviewee to be able to hear each other speak, we actually set up a separate Zoom session on both the interviewer and the interviewee's laptops. So they actually chat together via this Zoom session. So what we do, so that we don't get too much of the other person being recorded in each of the individual phone recordings, we tend to turn the laptop volume down at both ends so that it's just loud enough so that they can hear each other, but not so loud that it bleeds into the other recording. So that's the way we facilitate the communication between the podcast participants. And at the end of the process, each of the interviewer and the interviewee will share their recording. So most phones have got the ability to be able to share a recording on either device. Normally it gets sent by email, and the interviewee will send theirs to the host. The host will send their recording to themselves. And then after all of that, the host will send me both the interviewer and the interviewee recordings. And that's how it gets to the producer.